The quiet dawn of Alexandria, Virginia, was shattered by the desperate, unrelenting barks of Lucy. The German shepherd's cries cut through the stillness of the suburban morning, a sharp, panicked sound that sent uneasy shivers down the spines of those who heard her. Neighbors stirred, curtains were drawn back, but no one dared approach. The dog had not ceased her vigil since first light. She stood rigid beside the gleaming mahogany coffin that held, or was supposed to hold, James Wilson Jr. Sarah Wilson stood on the porch of her home, her trembling hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee, her haunted gaze locked on Lucy. "That dog hasn't quieted since they brought him home," she whispered, her voice thin and frail like a ghost of itself. Her son was gone, a decorated military officer, lost to a classified mission. They told her he had died a hero. They had folded the flag and placed it in her hands. They had given her the casket sealed shut. They had said the body was unviewable, that it was best to remember him as he was. But Lucy knew something was wrong. The dog had been at James's side for 5 years, trained for combat, trained to detect danger. And now she was sounding an alarm no one could ignore. Michael Thompson, James's childhood best friend and a former detective, had been watching the scene unfold from the front steps. He had sworn long ago to protect what remained of the Wilson family, ever since James Sr. had vanished 20 years ago on a classified mission of his own. Now, as he watched Sarah, hollow-eyed and silent, and Lucy, frantic and desperate, an icy sensation crept up his spine. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice low, edged with something dangerous, "open the casket." She turned to him, her breath catching. "Michael, open it," he insisted. "Something's not right." Her fingers clenched around her coffee cup. Her heart pounded against her ribs, fear tightening its grip. She didn't want to see what was inside. Or worse, what wasn't. With a slow, reluctant nod, Sarah stepped forward. The clasps of the casket were polished, gleaming in the morning sun. Hands trembling, she reached for them. Lucy's barking reached a fever pitch. Then suddenly silence. A low guttural growl rumbled from deep within her chest. And then, a sudden roar of an engine. Tires screeched against asphalt. Michael spun around just in time to see a black van tearing away from the curb, disappearing into the thick morning mist. His heart slammed against his ribcage. Damn it! But his attention snapped back just as Sarah lifted the lid. The inside of the coffin was pristine, untouched, empty. A single piece of paper rested against the silk lining, stark against the pale fabric. 3 words scrawled in a familiar, urgent hand. "History repeats itself." Sarah staggered back, her knees giving out beneath her. The world tilted, memories slamming into her like an oncoming storm. She hit the floor, gasping for breath as 20 years of grief, confusion, and unanswered questions came crashing down on her. James Sr.'s empty coffin, the rushed funeral arrangements, the insistence on a closed casket, the cryptic glances exchanged between military officials. Her analytical mind, once razor-sharp, now dulled by decades of grief, roared back to life. They're connected. Michael knelt beside her, gripping her arms. "Sarah, talk to me." She turned to him, eyes wide with a horrifying realization. "James knew. He was trying to tell me. Before he left for that mission, he called me. He said." A lump formed in her throat. "He said if anything happened to him, there was something I needed to know about his father's disappearance." Michael's jaw tightened. And then the call cut out. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her face. "I thought it was just a bad connection. I thought it was nothing. But it wasn't, was it?" Michael stood, running a hand through his hair, his detective instincts firing on all cylinders. "Sarah, listen to me. If James Jr. is alive, he's in danger. And if this is connected to James Sr." He let out a slow, controlled breath. "Then whatever took them both is still out there." Lucy whined, nosing at Sarah's trembling hands. Sarah wiped at her tears, inhaling sharply. "Then we find them. Both of them." Michael met her gaze, his expression dark, determined. "We don't stop until we do." James Jr. hadn't been investigating just anything. He had been hunting for the truth about his father's disappearance. And now someone knew. Through the window, Sarah saw it. A black van parked across the street, its engine idling like a predator waiting to strike. Two men in dark suits stepped out, their movements crisp, efficient. Military training. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Sarah, get your coat," Michael ordered, his detective instincts kicking in. His voice was tight, urgent. "Whatever's happening here, we need to move. Now." Lucy's growl deepened, a low primal warning that made the hairs on the back of Sarah's neck rise. The dog knew danger. Footsteps approached the front door. Sarah's fingers tightened around the envelope James Jr. had left her. She snatched the metal box from the table, the one Lucy had been so insistent about. Michael tugged her arm. "Back door. Now." They slipped through the kitchen just as the front door creaked open. "Sarah, we need to talk about James." General Anderson's voice carried through the house, but the warmth was gone. He wasn't here to comfort her. Lucy led the way, her movements precise, controlled. Sarah realized with a jolt. The dog had been trained for this exact moment. For escape. For protection. More vehicles arrived. The crunch of tires on frozen pavement sent a fresh wave of fear through Sarah. Michael guided them toward his garage, his eyes scanning the street. "My car's ready," he whispered. "James Jr. asked me last month to keep an emergency bag in my trunk." He knew this day would come. Sarah clutched the envelope to her chest. The box felt heavier in her hands now. Her husband had vanished under mysterious circumstances 20 years ago. Now her son had suffered the same fate. It wasn't a coincidence. It never had been. "This started with James Sr.," she murmured, the certainty settling in her bones. "Our son found out the truth." Lucy tensed beside her as multiple sets of boots hit the porch. A swarm of military officials moved through the house with calculated efficiency. Through a crack in the garage door, Sarah watched General Anderson direct the search, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Full sweep of the premises," he ordered, his voice cutting through the cold morning air. "They can't have gone far. And remember, Mrs. Wilson is not to be harmed. She's as much a victim as anyone." Colonel Richards emerged from the house, holding Lucy's chew toy between his fingers. "Sir," he said, "the dog's trail is fresh. They left minutes ago." He turned the toy over, examining it. His expression darkened. "There's something else," he continued. "The metal box is missing." General Anderson's jaw clenched. "That complicates things." He pulled out his phone. "Eagle's Nest is compromised," he said in a hushed tone. 20 years of work at risk." "Yes, sir." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Michael touched her arm, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to go." The driveway was too exposed. The garage's back door was their only chance. A new voice rang through the morning air, one that sent a shiver of pure dread down Sarah's spine. "Anderson, this is no longer your operation." Assistant Director Wesley Parker, Military Intelligence, the man who had handled James Sr.'s case 20 years ago. He stepped onto the driveway, his eyes scanning the house with cold efficiency. "My team takes over from here," he said. "Mrs. Wilson must be found before she opens that box. 20 years of secrets don't unravel today." Sarah's grip on the box tightened. The same man. The same situation. 2 decades apart. "James Jr.'s last words," she whispered. "Something you need to know about Dad's disappearance." The pieces were falling into place. Michael led her through the back exit, Lucy moving in perfect sync. His car was parked just beyond the alley. He threw open the door. "Storage unit," he said. "James Jr. rented one last year. Had me keep a backup key. We need to go now." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She slid into the passenger seat as Lucy jumped in behind her. As Michael sped away, Parker's voice echoed in her mind. "Mrs. Wilson must be found before she opens that box. Whatever was inside, it was dangerous. And it was the key to everything." The storage facility loomed ahead, a nondescript building on the outskirts of Alexandria. Michael took a long winding route, watching the rearview mirror for any signs they had been followed. None yet. Sarah's pulse pounded as they reached Unit 247. The number was engraved into the metal box in her hands. She turned the key and lifted the door. The sight inside stole her breath away. Maps. Photographs. Documents. The walls were covered in red strings connecting names, dates, locations. At the center of it all, James Sr.'s face. "He was investigating," Sarah whispered. All this time, James Jr. was piecing it together. Michael scanned the papers. "These cases go back decades," he murmured. "Operation Eclipse. Agents vanishing. All ruled as accidents or training mishaps." He pointed at a familiar face. "Look, Assistant Director Parker. He appears in most of these cases." Sarah's fingers trembled as she finally unlocked the metal box. Inside was a single DVD. And a letter. Her breath caught as she read James Jr.'s words. "Mom, if you're reading this, they made me disappear. Just like Dad. But I'm not dead. Neither is he. I found him. Dad's alive." Sarah's legs gave out. She dropped to the floor, her vision blurring with tears. Lucy pressed against her side, whining softly. Michael grabbed the DVD. "We need to move," he said. "They'll find this place soon." A sharp knock on the storage unit door made them both freeze. Lucy's ears perked. But she didn't growl. Instead, her tail wagged slightly. "Mrs. Wilson," a voice called quietly. "It's General Anderson. I'm alone. It's time you knew the whole truth." Sarah met Michael's eyes. Then she looked at Lucy. The dog's training had never failed them. She took a deep breath. "Let him in. Parker would have eliminated the threat. Your grief protected you." Anderson's voice was urgent now. His words clipped as more footsteps echoed dangerously close. James Jr. discovered the operation by accident. He found old mission files that didn't add up, inconsistencies buried beneath layers of classified reports. When he started asking questions, Parker noticed. "I tried to warn him, tried to guide his investigation quietly, but he was his father's son, relentless, determined, unwilling to stop until he uncovered the truth." Sarah's breath caught. "And now?" Her voice wavered, raw with fear and realization. "Now they're working together? They've been gathering the final pieces, but Parker suspects something. The empty coffin, it was a message, wasn't it? They knew we'd check. They knew we'd find out. They're forcing our hand." A low growl rumbled in Lucy's throat as she stood rigid by the door. Anderson's gaze flicked toward the sound before pulling a small key from his pocket and pressing it into Sarah's palm. "Storage Unit 4001 across town. It holds James Sr.'s original evidence. Everything you need to finally understand what happened 20 years ago. But be careful who you trust. Parker's reach is deeper than you can imagine." Michael glanced at his watch, urgency tightening his jaw. "We need to move." Anderson inhaled sharply and straightened his uniform, his expression unreadable. "I'll create a diversion. Head west, stay off main roads, and Sarah." He hesitated at the threshold, his voice softer now. "James Sr. never stopped loving you. Every choice he made was to keep you safe." The word struck her harder than she expected. As Anderson disappeared into the darkness, Sarah clutched the key in a trembling fist. 20 years of unanswered questions were finally unraveling. But with every revelation came a new threat. The investigation her husband started, the mission their son had taken up, it had all led to this moment. Michael exhaled, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Looks like we're going to Unit 4001. But Sarah shook her head, her mind piecing together a puzzle only now becoming clear. She turned to the evidence wall, tracing the years of meticulous research James Jr. had gathered. "No. First, we need to understand why they moved against James Jr. now. Something changed. Something made them desperate enough to risk exposing their entire operation." Lucy's tail flicked, her body language eerily reminiscent of the moments James Jr. had been onto something big during training. Sarah's chest tightened. They weren't just hiding past crimes. They were covering up something that hadn't happened yet. Michael's brow furrowed as realization dawned. "We're not just investigating a conspiracy. We're trying to stop one." Sarah's jaw set. "And somewhere out there, my husband and son are counting on us to finish what they started." They drove in silence, the weight of the past pressing down on them as Michael navigated the back roads. The moment they reached a quiet side street, Sarah finally cracked. 20 years of grief and anger burst from her like a dam breaking. How could he do this to us? Her voice shattered, hands gripping the old photograph she always carried. 20 years, Michael. 20 years I thought he was dead. I raised our son alone. Watched him graduate without a father. lived through the pitying looks, the condolences. And all this time he was out there, watching from the shadows. Michael said nothing, letting her words cut through the stillness of the car. Lucy whined softly from the back seat, sensing her pain. And James Jr., Sarah choked out. He found his father, worked with him, and he didn't tell me. My own son. Her voice broke. He carried this secret. Lied to me. For what? To protect you, Michael murmured. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. Protect me? I was an intelligence analyst, Michael. I could have helped. But instead they decided I was too weak. Too fragile. And now they're both gone. Playing dead while I'm left to follow the breadcrumbs. Michael pulled the car to a stop, turning to face her. Sarah, listen to me. You have every right to be furious. But right now you need to channel that anger. Because they don't need you to grieve. They need you to fight. She swallowed hard. They don't need me. They've done just fine without me. No, Michael said firmly. They survived without you. That's different. Everything in that storage unit, everything James Jr. gathered, it wasn't just about exposing corruption. He was trying to bring his father home to you. To end this. Lucy nudged Sarah's shoulder, her warm eyes steady and knowing. Sarah closed her eyes, breathing through the storm raging inside her. Michael reached into his jacket, pulling out a small notebook. I found this hidden behind the evidence wall. Sarah flipped it open, recognizing her son's handwriting immediately. Day 847 of investigation, found Dad's old case files. Everything makes sense now. Why he couldn't come home. Why he had to let us believe he was dead. The network runs deeper than anyone imagined. But I swear, Mom, I'm going to fix this. Going to bring him home to you. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know that every single day he was away, he was fighting to come back to us. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks, but the weight in her chest was different now. He was trying to fix our family. Michael nodded. Both of them were. Everything they did, it wasn't about keeping you in the dark. It was about ending this fight so they could come home. Sarah clenched her jaw, looking down at the key to Unit 4001. Then let's finish it. But when I find them, a small smirk ghosted her lips. They're both grounded for life. Lucy wagged her tail and for a brief moment it felt like hope. Unit 4001 was in the oldest section of the storage facility, its rusted lock fighting against the key. When the door groaned open, dust swirled in the dim light. Unlike James Jr.'s meticulously organized unit, this one looked abandoned, old furniture, military trunks, forgotten memories left to rot. Sarah ran her hand along an old dresser. James Sr. used to say the best place to hide something important was among things no one questioned. Lucy sniffed through the room with precision, stopping at an old footlocker. She pawed at it, her tail stiff. Sarah's breath hitched. That's my hope chest. The one I used when we first got married. Michael helped her pry it open, revealing a false bottom. Beneath it lay a sealed metal container and a yellowed envelope. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened the letter. The ink faded but the words striking deep. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Michael opened the metal box, pulling out documents, photographs, then a USB drive. He frowned. This isn't 20 years old. This is recent. Sarah's pulse quickened. James Jr. was here. He found his father's evidence and added his own. She plugged the drive into her laptop, scanning through its files. Oh my God. Her voice barely registered as her analyst training took over. Parker's group, they're planning something. Something big. Michael leaned in. How big? Sarah's blood ran cold. Nationwide. Coordinated attacks. Next week. A sound outside made them both freeze. Lucy's ears twitched, but instead of growling, she wagged her tail slightly. A voice drifted through the doorway. Hello, Sarah. She knew that voice. Knew it in her bones. Slowly she turned. James Wilson Sr. stood in the doorway. Older, lined with years of hidden battles, but his eyes, those same stormy eyes that had captured her heart, hadn't changed. I'm sorry, he said, voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry for everything. Lucy moved between them, her tail wagging, confirming what Sarah's heart already knew. This was real. This was him. 20 years of grief, anger, love, and longing crashed into her like a tidal wave as she stood frozen. staring at the man she had mourned, the man who had chosen to let her believe he was dead, the man she had never stopped loving. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The world seemed to hold its breath. The storage unit's dim light cast long shadows as dust motes hung motionless in the air, as if even time itself had stalled in this moment. Sarah took a hesitant step forward, then another. James Sr. remained still, his gaze locked onto hers, his eyes filled with something she couldn't decipher: regret, longing, pain. When she reached him, her fingers lifted of their own accord, trembling as they brushed against his cheek. Warm, real, alive. Then, with a sharp crack that echoed off the storage unit walls, she slapped him. Lucy let out a soft whimper, and Michael tensed near the door. But James didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes and nodded slightly. 20 years, Sarah choked out, her voice raw. 20 years of nightmares. 20 years of watching our son grow up without his father. 20 years of living with an empty grave. Her hands clenched into fists. I deserve that. His voice was low, rough with emotion. I deserve worse. Sarah swallowed back the scream threatening to escape her throat. Where is he? Where is James Jr.? James's face darkened. Safe. Hidden. But we don't have much time. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. No. No more cryptic answers. No more half-truths. You don't get to walk back into my life and start giving orders. You tell me everything. Now. Michael moved subtly to guard the door, his stance protective, ready. James exhaled sharply, then sat down on an old trunk, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the past. Parker's group, they call themselves the Foundation. They're planning something in 3 days. A coordinated attack on multiple military installations. They want it to look like a foreign terrorist attack. Sarah's stomach turned. Why? Money. Power. They're orchestrating a crisis, one that forces the government to react. Defense contracts. Military control. But it's more than that now. They're not just profiting from chaos. They're shaping the future. And James Jr. got too close. He found the link, direct evidence tying Parker to weapons sales, to orchestrated conflicts. When they realized who he was, they moved to silence him. My son, Sarah whispered, horror sinking into her bones. They tried to kill my son. James clenched his jaw. We planned for that. The coffin, the storage units, it was all part of the deception. We needed them to believe they had one. It was the only way to buy time. Sarah's hand shook as she processed it all. So all of this was planned? My son played dead. Just like his father. James nodded. Every detail. We needed them off his trail. We needed them focused on the wrong threats while he gathered the final proof. Her fury reignited. And you thought I couldn't help? That I was better off thinking you were both dead. James met her gaze, pain etched into every line of his face. Because you were an analyst, Sarah. One of the best. And they watch analysts the closest. Your grief protected you. If you had known the truth, they would have known. And they would have come for you too. That wasn't your choice to make, she snapped. Not for me. Not for our son. James closed his eyes, his breath unsteady. No. It wasn't. I've had 20 years to regret that decision. 20 years of watching from the shadows while you suffered. While our son grew up. Every day I told myself, just one more piece of evidence. Just one more connection. Then I can end this and come home. His voice broke. Every day I was wrong. A sharp knock at the door snapped their heads toward the entrance. Lucy's ears perked, but she didn't growl. Friend then. General Anderson entered, his face grim. We have a problem. What now? Michael asked. Parker moved up the timeline. The attack happens tomorrow. The words sent ice through Sarah's veins. Why? Because, a new voice answered from the doorway. I told them you were getting close. Colonel Richards. With a gun. Lucy let out a deep rumbling growl, her body tense. You think Parker wouldn't have someone close to Anderson? Richards sneered. I've been watching you for months. Reporting every move. Did you really think you had the upper hand? It's over. We know about James Jr.'s infiltration. He's probably already dead. Sarah's world tilted. A scream of denial built in her chest, but James's hand found hers under the table, squeezing firmly. You're wrong, she said, her voice shockingly steady. About everything. Richards hesitated. What are you? Did you really think, another voice came from behind him, that I wouldn't have a backup plan? James Jr. stepped into view. Alive. Whole. His gun pressed against Richards's back. Lucy's tail wagged in recognition. Drop it, James Jr. ordered, his voice cool, commanding. Richards hesitated for half a second too long. Then he obeyed. The gun clattered to the floor. His face drained of color as James Jr. cuffed him. You don't understand. Parker's network is too big, too powerful. You'll never. Never what? James Sr. interrupted, stepping forward. Never get enough evidence? Never find all the conspirators? He pulled a laptop from his bag and set it on the table, the screen lighting up with thousands of files. For 20 years I documented everything. Every meeting. Every transaction. Every player. And my son? He spent the last week inside their network, copying their entire database. Sarah's heart pounded as she took it all in. They had done it. They had the proof. Parker is on his way, James Jr. said, looking at Anderson. He thinks Richards lured you into a trap. Instead, we lured him into ours. Anderson pulled out his phone. All units move in. Operation Eclipse is a go. Richards slumped in defeat. Sarah turned to James Jr., her son, who stood before her for the first time since his death. He looked older, wearier but strong. Unbreakable. Just like his father. He met her eyes, hesitant. Hi, Mom. A small, almost sheepish smile. Sorry about the Coffin thing. Tears blurred her vision as she exhaled a shaky breath. You're grounded. Both of you. James Jr. chuckled, then sobered. This isn't over yet. Parker's coming. Sarah turned to face the door. She wasn't just an observer in this anymore. She was ready. And this time she was finishing what they started. Sarah moved between her husband and son, her heart pounding as she stood between them. After 2 decades of grief, deception, and separation, her family was finally whole. But there was no time to celebrate. The distant roar of helicopters and the unmistakable crunch of approaching vehicles shattered the fragile moment of reunion. Parker's here, James Jr. announced, his voice steady but urgent. He checked his phone, scanning the incoming signals. And he didn't come alone. His entire inner circle is with him. Just like we planned. Richards, still restrained in his chair, sneered. How did you know they'd come? Sarah turned her sharp gaze on him. Because you told them exactly what they wanted to hear. A chance to wipe out everyone who knew the truth, all in one strike. It was too tempting to resist. James Jr. smirked, nodding toward his mother. Mom figured it out the second we showed her the evidence. She saw the pattern, knew how they'd react. James Sr. looked at Sarah with a mixture of admiration and regret. We should have involved you from the beginning. Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, you should have. But right now we have a job to finish. Outside, Parker's voice boomed through the night, barking orders to his men as they prepared to breach the house. He had no idea he was walking into a trap 20 years in the making. Lucy, sensing the tension, took position by the door, ears alert, body tense. The German shepherd that had unraveled a conspiracy was now about to help end it. Ready? James Jr. asked, glancing between his parents. Sarah reached out, gripping both their hands. Together this time, she said firmly. No more secrets. No more separate battles. James Sr. squeezed her hand. Together. The front door exploded open downstairs. Parker stormed into the briefing room, flanked by 4 heavily armed men. His sharp, calculating gaze swept the room, locking onto Richards, then flicking to the Wilson family, standing together unbroken. General Anderson sat calmly at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Parker's lips curled into a smirk. It's over. Anderson leaned forward, folding his hands. Yes, he said quietly. It is. Parker's smirk faltered as he processed the meaning behind those words. You think you've won, he scoffed. I've spent 30 years building this network. You really believe you can just... Yes, James Sr. cut him off, stepping forward. We can. Because while you were building your empire of corruption, I was documenting every move you made. Parker turned his gaze on James Jr. And you, he sneered. Following in your father's footsteps. How touching. James Jr. met his stare without flinching. Not quite. I did something better. I followed in my mother's footsteps. He glanced at Sarah. She was the analyst. She taught me how to see patterns. How to predict your moves. Sarah felt a swell of pride deep in her chest. Even apart, even through decades of loss, her influence had shaped her son into the man he had become. You're surrounded, she told Parker. Every exit is covered. Your conspirators are being arrested across the city. That attack you planned for tomorrow? It's not happening. For the first time, Parker's composure cracked. His nostrils flared. His fingers curled into fists. Kill them, he snarled. Kill them all. Before his men could react, Lucy launched herself at the nearest gunman, snarling as she knocked him to the ground. Simultaneously, hidden FBI teams burst through both entrances, weapons raised. The room erupted into chaos, but within seconds, Parker's men were disarmed, forced to their knees. Parker stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. His breath came in short, furious gasps. Sarah stepped toward him, locking eyes with the man who had torn her family apart. We predicted your moves, she said. All of them. As Parker and his men were dragged away, silence settled over the room. The weight of 20 years of deception, of sacrifice, of loss, hung heavy in the air. Sarah turned to her husband and son. 20 years of planning. Of hiding. Of fighting. It's really over. James Jr. nodded, stepping forward to embrace her. It's over, Mom. We can go home. Sarah pulled back slightly, fixing them both with a sharp look. But first, we need to talk about your communication skills. Both of you. James Sr. winced. Sarah, No, she interrupted. Let me finish. You both chose to carry this burden alone. You let me believe you were dead rather than trust me with the truth. Do you have any idea what that did to me? James Jr. looked down. Mom, we wanted to tell you. Every day. But one wrong move and Parker would have. I understand the reasons, she said, voice shaking. But understanding doesn't make it hurt any less. She looked between them. Promise me. No more secrets. No more lone crusades. Whatever comes next, we face it together. James Sr. stepped forward, taking her hands in his. I promise. No more secrets. No more running. Me too, James Jr. added. Besides, you figured out in one day what took us years to piece together. We'd be idiots not to keep you on the team. Sarah laughed through her tears, pulling them both into a tight embrace. Lucy bounded over, barking happily, pressing her nose into the hug. They laughed, the tension finally breaking. Michael cleared his throat from the doorway. Hate to break up the reunion, but the press is outside. The story is about to break. Let them wait, Sarah said, holding her family close. We've waited 20 years for this moment. They can wait a few minutes more. And for the first time in 2 decades, the Wilson family was whole again. 40 minutes into the operation, Sarah's world shattered. The tracking signals for James Sr. and James Jr. blinked out simultaneously. A cold wave of panic crashed over her, but she forced herself to focus. Last known location, she demanded, her fingers a blur over the keyboard. Michael leaned in, his expression grim. Old warehouse district. Near the airfield. He pointed at the glowing red dot on the map. Then it vanished. Sarah stared at the empty space where her family had just been. The comms had gone silent mere moments before the trackers failed. Not a coincidence. Her mind raced through the possibilities, every scenario grimmer than the last. She knew, Sarah whispered, the revelation hitting her like a hammer to the chest. Elizabeth knew they'd come for her. It's a trap. Anderson's hand was already on his phone, ready to call in a full tactical team, but Sarah stopped him with a sharp look. Wait. Sarah, they could be. They're alive. Her voice was steel. Elizabeth needs them alive. Those agent names are encrypted. She needs James Sr.'s decryption key. And she'll use James Jr. as leverage to make him cooperate. Michael frowned. So what's the move? Sarah grabbed her coat, her mind working at lightning speed. I'm not making the same mistake they did. I'm not going to protect everyone by trying to do this alone. She turned to Michael and Anderson, her eyes burning with determination. I need your help. What's the plan? Anderson asked. Sarah pulled an old photograph from her purse, an image of her and Elizabeth from 20 years ago, smiling at a military wives' luncheon. She didn't just betray my husband, Sarah murmured, her fingers tightening around the photo. She betrayed me. She was my friend. She watched me grieve, comforted me, helped me raise James Jr., all while knowing the truth. Her voice trembled, but not with sadness. With fury. Michael studied her face. She thinks she knows your weaknesses. Sarah nodded. But she's forgotten something crucial. What's that? Anderson asked. That before I was a wife or a mother, I was an intelligence analyst. Sarah's gaze darkened. And I've had 20 years to think about what I'd do differently if I ever got another chance. She spread a map of the warehouse district on the table. Elizabeth will expect a tactical response. SWAT. Military support. She won't expect me. Anderson hesitated. Because you're just the grieving widow? Sarah gave a grim smile. Because she thinks she broke me 20 years ago. She's about to learn how wrong she is. She laid out her plan quickly. Michael and Anderson listened, refining the details. This wasn't just about saving James and James Jr. anymore. This was about ending a 20-year war that had stolen too many lives. Michael exhaled. It's risky. Sarah glanced at the dark tracking screens. At the empty space where her family had been. She thought of the promise they had made, no more secrets, no more lone crusades. I'm sure, she said. Because this time we're doing it my way. She checked her watch. We have 18 minutes. Let's move. As they stormed out, she touched the wedding ring she had never taken off. 20 years ago, she had been powerless to stop her family from being torn apart. But not this time. This time, she would bring them home. Inside the dimly lit warehouse, Elizabeth Morrison paced in front of her captives. James Sr. and James Jr. sat bound to chairs, their wrists bruised from the restraints. Lucy lay on the floor nearby, tranquilized. You know what I want, Elizabeth said coolly, holding up a flash drive. The decryption key, James. Or your son pays the price for your stubbornness. James Sr. strained against his bonds. His voice was hoarse. Those agents have families, Elizabeth. Children. Just like you did. Elizabeth's expression flickered with something unreadable, pain, maybe. But it was gone in an instant. Had she corrected? Before Parker's operation got my husband killed. She checked her watch. 10 minutes until my flight. Last chance, James. A noise from outside made her pause. Footsteps. A door opening. That's close enough, Elizabeth called out, drawing her weapon. Show yourself. Sarah Wilson stepped into the light. Hands raised, calm as ever. Elizabeth blinked, genuinely surprised. Sarah. Sarah took another step forward. I remembered something. 20 years ago, at Emily's birthday party, you mentioned this place. Said your father used to own it. Elizabeth's grip on the gun tightened. Stay back. Sarah didn't stop. You know what else I remember? You held my hand at James's funeral. You brought casseroles for weeks. You helped me pick out James Jr.'s college applications. I had to maintain my cover, Elizabeth said. But her voice had lost some of its edge. No, Sarah said softly. You were my friend. That part wasn't a lie, was it? Elizabeth hesitated. Sarah took another step. I saw how it hurt you. Watching me grieve. Elizabeth's gun wavered. You don't understand. Her voice cracked. Parker killed Tom. My husband. I do understand. Sarah's voice was gentle but unyielding. Better than anyone. She motioned toward James Sr. and Jr. But this makes you know better than Parker. Mom, James Jr. warned, seeing Elizabeth's finger twitch on the trigger. Sarah ignored him. You spent 20 years plotting revenge. I spent 20 years rebuilding. Raising a son who chose justice over vengeance. She was close now. Just within reach. It's not too late, Elizabeth. Not for redemption. Not for peace. For a moment, the warehouse hung in perfect silence. Then Lucy, who had been playing unconscious, suddenly lunged. The German Shepherd hit Elizabeth full force, knocking her off balance. The gun clattered to the floor. At the same moment, Michael and Anderson stormed in from different entrances. Sarah moved fast, helping Michael restrain Elizabeth while Anderson cut the bonds from James Sr. and Jr. How did you know Lucy was faking? James Jr. asked, rubbing his wrists. Sarah smiled. Because she was my friend. And I taught her everything she knew about tranquilizers, including the correct dosage for a dog Lucy's size. Elizabeth, now cuffed, looked at Sarah with a strange mix of regret and admiration. You were always the better analyst. No, Sarah corrected. I just never forgot what I was fighting for. As agents led Elizabeth away, the Wilson family formed a tight circle, Lucy prancing around them, tail wagging. I believe, Sarah said, checking her watch, you two promised me dinner. James Sr. pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. 1 hour. Just like we promised. Actually, James Jr. grinned, it was 58 minutes. Mom's plan worked perfectly. They stepped into the dawn of a new day, a day without secrets, without separation, without fear. The price of loyalty had been steep, but its reward was finally within reach. James Sr.'s fingers trembled as he turned to the final page, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, our son found me. He has your strength, your determination. Together, we're close to ending this. But I'm afraid. Not of Parker. Not of death. I'm afraid that when the truth comes out, you won't be able to forgive me for choosing duty over our family. For making our son carry this burden too. If you're reading this, it means we succeeded. It means I can finally come home. I just pray it's not too late for us." Sarah gripped the journal, pressing it to her chest as if she could somehow absorb the lost years, the love trapped in ink on brittle pages. 20 years of letters she had never read. 20 years of watching from a distance. It must have been torture, she whispered. James Sr. exhaled, the weight of decades in his sigh. It was. But it was necessary. To keep you safe. To give us a chance at a future. Sarah looked at him, her heart hammering. And now? He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing against hers, tentative, unsure. "Now if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the next 20 years making up for the ones we lost." Lucy lifted her head, tail wagging as if sensing the shift in the room. The worst was over. The secrets were out. What remained was the slow, painful work of rebuilding something that had been shattered for 2 decades. As the evening deepened, James Sr. spread photos and documents across the coffee table, laying out the timeline of his 20-year mission. It started small. Routine intelligence reports, discrepancies in weapons contracts, missing funds. But the deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Sarah traced a photograph of Parker standing alongside military officials, her analyst's mind snapping into place. How deep did it go? Deeper than anyone imagined. Parker wasn't just funneling money. He was placing his people in key positions, shaping military policy, manipulating international relations. James Jr. picked up a classified document, brow furrowed. "When did you realize Elizabeth was involved?" James Sr.'s jaw tightened. 5 years in. At first I trusted her. She'd lost her husband. She seemed to be fighting the same battle. But she always knew too much. Always had information she shouldn't have. She played both sides perfectly. Sarah's stomach churned. Even I never suspected. And I saw her almost every day. That's what made her so valuable to Parker. She was above suspicion. A grieving widow, just like you, who would question her motives. Lucy whined softly, ears twitching at the tension in the room. James Jr. absent-mindedly ran a hand over her fur, his mind elsewhere. "The hardest part for you was watching me follow in your footsteps, wasn't it?" James Sr. nodded, his expression shadowed. "I left clues hoping you'd find the truth. The old case files, the redacted mission reports. I thought if you understood why I had to disappear, you'd stay away. But I never expected you to join the fight." James Jr. gave a dry chuckle. "What choice did I have? My father taught me some things are worth sacrificing everything for." Sarah swallowed against the lump in her throat. She reached for a photo. James Sr., standing in the distance at their son's military academy graduation. "Watching. Always watching. All those years you were protecting us both." "Trying to," James Sr. corrected. "But in the end you both proved stronger than anything I could have done to protect you. You," he turned to James Jr., "became a better agent than I ever was. And you," he looked at Sarah, eyes soft with something deeper than regret. "Never stopped being the brilliant analyst who first caught my attention all those years ago." James Jr. smirked. "We made quite a team. The agent who disappeared, the son who found him, and the analyst who brought them both home." "Don't forget Lucy," Sarah said with a small smile as the dog thumped her tail against the floor. "She played her part perfectly." James Sr. reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, worn notebook. "And this is their playbook. Every operation Parker's network has planned for the next 5 years." Sarah's breath hitched as she took the book, her mind already racing. "With this, we can stop them before they start." James Jr. nodded. "We can protect other families from going through what we did." James Sr. watched them both, his heart full for the first time in decades. His family was not just reunited. They were stronger. Together, they would ensure no other family had to make the choices he had made. Much later, as Sarah moved through the quiet house, she reached for an old baseball cap tucked into the cabinet. A small envelope fluttered to the floor. Inside was a photograph, one she had never seen before. Dated just 6 months after James Sr.'s supposed death. She carried it back to the living room where James Sr. and James Jr. were still discussing the notebook's contents. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "What is this?" The photo showed 8-year-old James Jr. sitting on a park bench talking to someone just out of frame. But Sarah knew. The date stamp told her exactly who that someone was. "You met," she whispered, the betrayal slicing through her. James Jr. stood slowly, taking the photo from her hands. "Once a year. On my birthday. Mom, I'm so sorry. We should have told you." Sarah's hands clenched. "How? How did it start?" James Sr. ran a hand through his hair, guilt heavy in his voice. "It was an accident. I was watching from a distance, like always. But James Jr. saw me. Even at 8, he recognized me immediately." James Jr.'s voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to tell you so badly. But Dad explained why we couldn't. That bad people would hurt you if they knew he was alive." Sarah's breath came fast and shallow. "So you carried that secret. Every birthday. Every year. And I never knew." James Jr. nodded. "For exactly 1 hour once a year we sat together. Talked about school, about you, about life. Then we went back to pretending." Lucy patted over, sensing Sarah's distress. But instead of anger, a strange peace washed over her. Her family had never truly broken. They had survived in secret meetings and stolen moments, and a little boy who had understood enough to protect the most important secret of his life. "You know what this means?" Sarah whispered, looking at the photo again. "Even then, we were never truly apart." James Sr. moved to her side. "Every year after meeting James Jr., I wrote you a letter. I told you about how he'd grown, how proud I was, how much I missed you. I kept them." He reached for his journal, opening a hidden compartment. Inside were 20 carefully preserved letters, each dated on their son's birthday. "I hoped one day I could give them to you." Sarah's hands trembled as she took the letters, the weight of 2 decades resting in her palms. "Read them to me," she said. "Both of you. Tell me about the birthdays I never knew about." As they settled onto the couch, Lucy curled at their feet. James Sr. opened the first letter. "Dear Sarah, today I saw our son. He's grown so tall." And together they began to fill in the missing pieces of their family story. Not just the mission, not just the danger, but the love, the moments stolen in the shadows, the bond that had survived the impossible. A family that had never truly broken. A family that at last was whole again. Sarah set down her wine glass, her eyes flickering with a spark of determination. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice light yet resolute, "about all those missed birthdays, holidays, anniversaries." James Sr. and James Jr. both stilled slightly, their bodies tensing as if bracing for a painful conversation. But then Sarah smiled, warm and full of something lighter than grief, hope. "We should celebrate them," she continued. "All of them. One each weekend until we're caught up." James Jr. grinned. "That's 20 years of celebrations. About a year's worth of parties." "Exactly." Sarah nodded, her decision final. "And we start with your 10th birthday, the first one you shared with your father in secret. I want to hear every detail, see every memory through both of your eyes." James Sr.'s hand tightened around hers. His voice was thick with emotion. "I'd like that. To finally share those moments with you." James Jr. leaned back, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "And the best part? 20 years' worth of presents." Laughter filled the room, rich and real, breaking the last remnants of lingering sorrow. Lucy's tail thumped against the floor in approval. Sarah exhaled, letting her gaze drift over the family she once thought lost. "For 2 decades, I believed we were broken. But we weren't, were we? We were just waiting. All of us. In our own ways. Fighting to find our way back to this table." James Sr. stood and pulled her into an embrace. James Jr. wrapped his arms around both of them, and even Lucy got up, pressing herself against their legs, unwilling to be left out of the family moment. "To new traditions," James Sr. said, voice thick with emotion. "And old ones made new again," Sarah added. To family, James Jr. finished simply. Outside, the sun set on another peaceful day, the kind of day they had fought 20 years to reclaim, the kind they would never take for granted again. The morning of Parker's sentencing dawned clear and bright. The Wilson family sat together in the courtroom, Lucy lying at their feet, her therapy dog credentials allowing her presence. The dog who had helped uncover the truth would witness justice being served. Parker and Elizabeth stood before the judge, their once powerful presence diminished by the weight of their crimes and the prison uniforms they now wore. Their influence was gone. Their secrets exposed. Their empire of lies crumbled. The defendants have been found guilty of conspiracy, treason, and multiple counts of endangering national security, the judge announced. However, before I pass sentence, the court will hear victim impact statements. Sarah rose first. Her voice was clear, unwavering. 20 years ago, these people stole my husband from me. They stole a father from my son. They forced a good man to choose between his duty and his family. And then they watched me grieve, pretended to comfort me, all while knowing the truth. She turned to Elizabeth, locking eyes with the woman who had played the role of a grieving widow while feeding Parker's lies. But they didn't break us. Every attempt to tear our family apart only proved how unbreakable we truly are. James Jr. spoke next. I grew up watching my mother try to be both parents. I never knew my father was out there, watching from the shadows, protecting us the only way he could. You didn't just steal our past. You tried to steal our future. Finally, James Sr. stood. Your Honor, I spent 20 years gathering evidence against these people, not for revenge, but for justice. Not just for my family, but for every family they hurt, every life they endangered in their pursuit of power. For the first time, Elizabeth's composure cracked. Her lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered, turning to Sarah. You were my friend. I should have. Yes, Sarah replied simply, you should have. The judge's sentence was swift and severe, life imprisonment without parole. As Parker and Elizabeth were led away in handcuffs, the Wilson family stood together, heads held high. Justice had been served. Outside, reporters swarmed with cameras flashing and questions flying, but the Wilsons ignored them. Lucy trotted ahead, tail high, leading her family away from the ghosts of the past. Where to now? James Jr. asked. Home, Sarah said simply. We have 20 years of memories to make up for, and I'm not wasting another minute on the people who tried to take them from us. James Sr. took her hand. The mission that kept us apart is finally over. No. Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with something fierce and unshakable. Our most important mission is just beginning. James Jr. raised a brow. And what's that? Being a family again, she said. Making up for lost time. Creating new memories to replace the ones we lost. Lucy barked as if sealing the promise, making them all laugh. Together they walked away from the courthouse, not just a family reunited, but a family made whole. 1 year later, the Wilson family gathered in their backyard for a very special celebration. The garden was draped in warm string lights, a banner reading, Happy First Re-Anniversary, swaying in the breeze. Sarah stood in front of their closest friends and family, holding James Sr.'s hands. James Jr. stood beside them as best man, while Lucy sat proudly at their feet, wearing a flower collar for the occasion. Sarah took a breath, her voice steady and full of love. 21 years ago, I thought I lost you. Today we're not just renewing our vows, we're making new ones. Ones that reflect everything we've learned about love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. James Sr. squeezed her hands. Sarah, when I left, I thought I was protecting our family. What I didn't realize was that you were always the strongest one among us. You kept our family's heart beating through 20 years of silence. You taught our son about love and loyalty. And when the time came, you brought us both home. Sarah's eyes glistened with tears. My vow to you is this, no more secrets. No more separate battles. Whatever comes, we face it together. And my vow, James Sr. answered, is to never leave again. To make up for every moment we lost. To create new memories to fill the spaces between. James Jr. surprised them both by stepping forward. And I promise to always be the bridge that connects you both. The son who carries both your strengths. The reminder of why our family fought so hard to find its way back together. Lucy barked softly, earning laughter from the crowd. And we promised to keep Lucy supplied with treats, Sarah added, chuckling as she scratched behind the dog's ears. Michael, standing among the guests, raised his glass. To the Wilson family, proof that love doesn't break. It just finds new ways to grow stronger. As the evening progressed, laughter and music filled the air. The Wilson family danced under the stars, surrounded by the people who had helped them reclaim their lives. Lucy pranced between guests, collecting pets and treats, her mission of keeping the family together now a joyful duty rather than a desperate one. Later, as Sarah and James Sr. swayed to their wedding song, she whispered, "Do you remember what you said to me at our first wedding?" He smiled. That you were my North Star. The light that would always guide me home. She leaned into him, her heart full. And here we are. Home at last. James Jr. joined them, Lucy following faithfully. The Wilson family, once shattered by duty and sacrifice, now stood whole, their bond unbreakable. Above them, the stars twinkled like promises kept, and ahead of them stretched a future full of the simple, precious moments they had fought so hard to reclaim.